What's good, folks? It's KnightmareFrame here with a new Warframe video, back with a third episode of the Warframe vs series. If you have not seen, I have two other videos going over Rhino vs Revenant and Frost vs Gara. The objective of these types of videos is to have a fundamental understanding of two Warframes, their role, break down their kit, and see which frame better suits you. Some frames have somewhat similar kits or serve a similar purpose, so that's why we put them up against each other. And today we're looking at two frames with the strongest exalted melee weapons, Baruuk and Valkyr. When I say exalted, I mean they have an ability, which is a moddable weapon and not an external equipable weapon, meaning they do not use a stat stick. However, they benefit from some melee set bonuses, like the sacrificial set bonus and the gladiator set bonus, to give them more crit chance. That's about it. For people just wanting a frame to take to level cap, because that's people's determining factor if a frame is good or not. Believe it or not, any frame can do level cap. Warframe is not a hard game. The sad fact is that one of the frames in today's video is in need of a desperate rework, while the other just needs a tweak to their mechanic and they will be 10 times better. Now let's break down both frames to see which one is good for you. Starting off with their passives. Baruuk has a restraint meter present above his abilities, and your job is to erode this restraint to start violence.
I don't want peace. I want problems, always!
Because Baruuk is a monk and a pacifist, you use his first three abilities, which are crowd control abilities, to erode the meter. And when this meter is eroded, you get to use your fourth ability, which is the exalted weapon. And at the same time, you gain 50% damage reduction when your restraint meter is fully depleted. Valkyr's passive are these two mods, Kavant's Grace and Handspring, but the Handspring portion of the passive is only 50%. Here's the thing, the Handspring portion is completely negated when your fourth ability is active, or if you have Prime Sure-Footed equipped. On to the first ability. Both of these are not great, but one of them makes sense. Baruuk's Elude increases his dodge chance to the maximum, where he's able to dodge every attack and have it phase right through his body. Literal Ultra Instinct mode. But here's the catch. While this is active, it drains energy over time, and if he uses any attack, he becomes vulnerable and can be damaged. However, you can only dodge attacks in front of you at base range, so you need a total of 200% ability range to get a full 360-degree angle to be able to dodge everything. And dodging attacks will erode your restraint meter. However, this is the ability that you will helmet off, because it is counterintuitive and counterproductive, even though it fits the theme. It does not fit the kit, or does not fit Warframe as a game, because you want to be killing things. Now onto Valkyr's first ability.
Oh my god! Okay, it's happening! Everybody stay calm!
What's the
Everybody
procedure,
stay calm.
everyone? What's the procedure?
Stay calm!
Wait.
Everybody calm down!
Instead of talking, this is her first ability. That was short and simple. Baruuk's Lull. He releases a calming wave that puts enemies to sleep, opening them up to finishers. And if enemies wake up, they have their alertness resets. Putting enemies to sleep erodes the restraint meter. Now here's the thing. Lull is the ability that erodes restraint the most and fastest, because it is AoE. However, you cannot put enemies to sleep if they're already asleep. This means you need to mod negative duration so it becomes somewhat spammable to then erode the restraint faster. So these are pretty much his only problems. First and second ability mechanic. Unfortunately, it doesn't end with Valkyr. Warcry. She shouts, slows down enemies once per cast within the radius, gives herself and allies armor and additional attack speed. This ability cannot be recasted until the duration runs out. So to apply the slow, wait for it to run out. The armor bonus becomes absolutely useless when she has her fourth ability active. Why? And armor only applies to health. And the attack speed is the only useful thing in this ability, and you can upkeep it with an augment. Desolate Hands. Baruuk surrounds himself with daggers that grant him 10% damage reduction per dagger. This damage reduction caps out to 90%, and strength increases the dagger count. The other thing is these daggers seek out enemies, deal damage, and disarm them. And disarming enemies will erode your restraint. The daggers also seek out allies, granting them damage reduction, up to 50% of the modded number of daggers. Good thing is that he does not lose the dagger count if it's shared with allies. If this ability is used with Elude, the first ability, it increases the seek out range to disarm enemies, and it doesn't wake up enemies if they're lulled. Valkyr's Paralysis. Valkyr uses her shields and energy as a resource to release a shockwave that deals damage and stuns enemies. Stunned enemies are open to finishers and susceptible to stealth multiplier damage. Finally, onto the fourth abilities, where the kit begins to make sense or make you wonder what was the point of all of the first three abilities if all they're going to do is punch things. Desert Storm. Baruuk's fourth ability allows him to wield Desert Wind, the exalted weapon, if he eroded a portion of his restraint meter. If the restraint fills up, you lose the ability, so you have to keep up with lulling and disarming enemies to maintain your fourth ability. This also means it does not consume energy. Also, while this ability is active, it gives him 50% damage reduction and slows enemies within a 3-meter radius by 50%. Desert Wind has 2 contact points with its attacks: physical contact and a ranged radial wave attack. Only the physical contact is able to build up combo, meaning you have to be in direct melee range and smack the enemies. Combo is important because Desert Wind is one of the 2 melee exalted weapons that gains bonus damage with built-up combo. The other one is Sevogot's Exalted, if you're wondering. Both attacks are affected by base damage modifiers. However, the physical contact hits are the only one that can scale with condition overload. So it's better to just mod raw base damage and strength instead of condition overload for just overall damage distribution. And primed reach only works for the physical contact hits and not the radial wave attacks. As you can see, there are some limitations to this ability. The damage Desert Wind deals is purely impact, and it does knock enemies back. However, the ability does have an augment called Reactive Storm, where it gives increased status chance and adaptive damage. This means it adapts the damage to the enemy's elemental weaknesses, except void, true damage, or even cold. It's weird, I know. It just converts those to either heat or puncture. This adaptive damage will prioritize shield weaknesses first before you tap into the enemy's health pool. However, you just do way too much damage, it's never an issue. This adaptive damage only converts the base impact damage, not your modded. And if the enemy is weak to your modded element, the adaptive damage gets added to your modded element, giving you more damage. The biggest damage multipliers of his attacks come from slide attacks, slams, heavies, and physical contact hits. The radial wave does less damage, but it's AoE and better for clearing. Although light slams and slide attacks are best used to build up combo. I know that was a lot just for Baruuk's ability. Hysteria, Valkyr's fourth ability. She becomes invulnerable to all incoming damage and wields her talons. Being invulnerable to damage makes armor useless, and part of her passive useless as well. Hopefully, now you understand my earlier statement. The ability drains energy over time and gradually increases the longer you're in the ability, meaning you either need a tremendous amount of incoming energy or deactivate it and reactivate it every 3 minutes to be somewhat safe. But legit, just use Nourish and never deactivate it. Come on. Who are we kidding here? And while you're in Hysteria, you emit an aura that is visible by a gradually expanding ring. It stores 30% of the ignored damage, and if you don't do something about this and deactivate the ability, this damage gets dealt to you all at once. To circumvent that, you have to kill and do a lot of killing to keep the ring small and avoid the damage buildup. She has an augment, good for short brief bursts of damage. With Enraged, you gain 200% bonus damage and crit chance. However, your Hysteria now has a duration and a cooldown. And the cooldown is based on how long you've used your Hysteria for. So the longer you use it, the longer the cooldown. This is useful in Disruption, but not for regular gameplay. Now that you see their strengths and weaknesses, what are their pros and cons? Let's start with the cons because it's a longer list. They are solo frames, meaning playing with teammates is going to feel like ass, especially if teammates have crazy nuke setups like Sevagoth, Korra, Mirage, etc. You get it, you get it. Now, unlike Valkyr, Baruuk needs to set up before he can start blasting, meaning he can't enter a mission, activate buffs, and start attacking with his Exalted. He needs to, of course, erode the restraint before anything, and that takes a bit of time. And this adds on to the fact he sucks with team play, because if you enter a mission, enemies die, you don't erode restraint, you're pretty much useless. Also, his radial attacks do have some issues with enemy elevation, where they don't hit anything, like so many other Warframe abilities that have this problem, and that can be quite annoying. Baruuk needs to mod negative duration to be optimal if you're using his 4th ability, and this kills the potential use of any other helmet ability that requires duration, especially damage buffing helmets that would completely boost his damage output. Valkyr's passive is completely useless if her 4th ability is active, and her only other useful ability is Warcry, which is a helmet, and only one bonus is useful. The rest of her abilities are just, well, pretend they don't exist. For Valkyr to optimally use her 4th ability, especially to maintain it, she can only use Nourish. That gives her an insane damage boost and energy multiplier, and you can completely throw out any range modifiers out the window. And for Valkyr to deal the most damage, you need to slide attack, because not only does this boost your damage, but it increases your range and gives multiple hits with one motion. Similarly, with Baruuk, to deal the most damage, you need to build up combo, and to build combo, you have two options: cope with tandem bond, slide attack, or do light slams. Your wave attacks just feel bad against certain enemy units, while your direct melee hits or slide attacks will just outperform the wave attacks in those situations, even though the wave attacks look cooler and have wider coverage. Now for the pros. They're tanky and deal insane damage with their exalted melees. Yep, that's it. But then, being tanky and doing a lot of damage isn't special. So up to you to decide whether you want less of a hassle with energy management and still have some versatility, or smack Nourish, spin to win, and try your best to keep track of enemies. I personally will always pick Baruuk over Valkyr. He looks cooler, plays better, and has other options, and all he needs is a slight tweak to his duration issue, and he will be a better frame, similar to what they did with the recent Trinity rework. Valkyr just needs a massive rework, period. She needs Jesus. Anyway, folks, that has been it for me. I do hope you enjoyed and learned something from this video. If you did, please feel free to leave a like, share, and
Subscribe.
for more Warframe content, streams, and so much more, do refer to the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, a peace. Bye-bye now. Bye. You're still here. Why? Yeah, you can also watch the other videos. It's cool.